Good morning. It's Saturday. Sunday. I got a cup of coffee. Let's talk about deployment in Kruleboyz. Oof. So, I'm going to go over two deployment lists here for Kruleboyz. The first one is a list that I have to say I'm super in love with right now. This is one that I just saw at the Las Vegas Open that's doing really well. I don't have any confirmed details about it yet, but I am super psyched on this list. I never thought that I would like a Grin and Blades list that played a ton of Gut Rippas, but here we are. So we have a battle regiment that is 2 blocks of 6 Bolt Boys with Hobgrots and Sledgeraker Beast. So this is probably going to be the last thing that we put down on the table, right? Because this is where a lot of our damage and power comes from. And then in a bunch of other battalions, we have... Actually, let me just pull it up real quick so I can actually see. So we have a Andorian Acolytes battalion, and of course that has the 2 Swamp Kala Shamans that are in it. And then we also have a Wizard Finders battalion, which I have run before in Big Wa, and I think is good. I think if you're going to go for a... Like, when it comes to drops in Age of Sigmar, I feel like you either need to be 2 or you need to be 15. And it doesn't matter. There's no sense, really, in trying to be, like, 6 drops, you know? Like, throwing things in a battle regiment is okay if there's kind of nothing else that you really have going on, right? Like, if it's like, well, there's nothing else really that I can do, then, you know, that's fine. Like, so, for example, in this list, these units here can't be a command entourage. There's not really much else that they can be unless I'm missing something. But so it's like, okay, so we're just gonna throw them in a battle regiment, and that's okay. But if there's something else that you can take, like if you can get another enhancement, for example, I think it's better to be 14 drops and have an extra enhancement than it is to be like 8 drops and not have that extra enhancement, right? You kind of lean into one or the other. That's why my Big Wa lists are always 14 drops. So the Wizard Finders, the Wizard Finder battalion includes both units of Gut Rippas and the Kill Boss with Stabgrot. You heard it right, folks. A Kill Boss with Stabgrot. If you're going to be running this many Gut Rippas, if you're going to run 2 reinforced unit of Gut Rippas, a Kill Boss on foot actually makes a lot of sense. He's only 90 points, right? Like, his price has been coming down a lot. I think he was like 120 or 130 when we started. So I think it was like 120. I could be wrong, but going from 120 to 90 is a huge points reduction. So what this Kill Boss means is that you don't have to use Inspiring Presence on blocks of Gut Rippas, because if you didn't have it, you would have to use Inspiring Presence on these Gut Rippas. So if you can kind of position this Kill Boss so he's within 3 of 2 different units, then like you're looking pretty good. And that's it for battalions, right? Andorian Acolytes, Wizard Finders, and Battle Regiment. So this is what I would consider to be a high drop Kruleboyz list, because we're, what are we, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 drops? So that's definitely like a high drop. So let's take this little army, spin it around, and let's have a look at our table here. We're going to review this low drop Kruleboyz list after. So here, just some basic stuff, right? So this is a map where it's cut in half, which means that we are actually 9 inches away from our opponent, which means that we have a 13-inch deployment zone, which is a larger deployment zone than if the territory was 25%, right? Because then we would have this zone. So again, at the very start of the game, asking your opponent questions like, how many casts do you have? How many drops do you have? Is there any shenanigans that you can sort of like get across the board and get me on turn 1, right? Are there any spells that have like an unlimited range, right? Like Croak or something like this? Or I'm not sure if Croak has it, but you get my point. Or do you have like really long range shooting? Like do you have 30 plus inch shooting that you can get to me? Do you have any teleports? Do you have any runs and charges? Like what is it that you can do to me if you choose to go first? And then do you have any deep strikes? Do you have, like, what do you have? And then from there, trying to figure out how far away from your opponent you need to position yourself. Because if you are playing a low drop list, your opponent is going to make you go first unless you make a deployment mistake and they see the opportunity to sort of get you on turn 1. So I don't recommend if you're watching this video, it means that you're still, like learning and trying to figure out deployment in Kruleboyz, just like me, so it means that you probably don't want to try some really high level stuff where you're like baiting your opponent into striking you on turn 1, right? So realistically, if you're high drops, you're going first. So if you look at a battle plan like this, so this is Power Flux, so this is the one where whoever goes second gets to pick one of these 2 objectives. So again, you have to kind of think to yourself, well, my opponent is going to get to make me go first, and they're also going to get to choose the 2 objectives. So of course they're going to choose these 2 objectives to try to pull you out. So you have to kind of think before the game, like exactly what your first turn looks like, and maybe even what your second turn looks like. And you also, if you're going first, have to be prepared to be double turned. So it's like, well, if I get to deploy, and then I get to unpack my castle a little bit, and then I'm about to get double turned. Plan for the double. Plan for the double. In lots of cases, it's actually kind of okay if you plan for it and if you're prepared for it to get doubled at the very beginning of the game. You also have to consider your super sneaky. I don't really know what this list wants to super sneaky. Gobsprack is always a good choice for super sneaky. Another good choice is, I mean, you could super sneaky a unit of Bolt Boys to get him within range, but actually, now that I remember, this list doesn't run super sneaky. This list runs Egomaniac. So that's another cool thing with having all these gut rippers, right? Is that you can stick a Sludge Raker so that he's, I think it's within 3, right, of both of these units, and then sort of like, you know, take the damage out as you will. But again, I don't really know the finesse of playing this list because I haven't talked to the person that wrote it. So if you're out there, if anyone knows whose list this is that's doing really well at LVO, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to get a sense of like why you picked. I get why you picked this list. Like it's a good list, but sort of how to play it and the like the little intricate ins and outs of how to play this list. So a good super sneaky target is going to be Gobsprack. Another good super sneaky target is going to be a whole unit of Gut Rippers. But like I said, this guy is not running super sneaky, so it's going to be Egomaniac instead. Okay, so this is going to be the last thing that we're going to drop because we don't want our opponent to know where the bulk of our damage is going to be. So we're going to start by just taking this unit of Gut Rippers, and we're going to assume that there's nothing that our opponent can do to get us on turn 1, and we're just going to kind of drop it on the front line here. Okay, so then it's our opponent's turn. Afterwards, we're going to take this other unit of Gut Rippers, and we're going to stick it also sort of right here on the front line-ish. Oh, I'm actually not on the front line. We're going to just deploy our guys forward. Let's get some color difference between these guys. Let's go with like a blue, boop, and a red. Click. Oh, also, if you're out there and you're listening to this, I'm looking for someone to help me perhaps run a TTS league through Discord. So if that's something that interests you, I seem to be having a really hard time finding the time to actually put things like that together. There's more that I want to do than I have time to do, I find. Okay, cool. So then we got our Swamp Collar Shamans. We're going to stick our Swamp Collar Shamans behind these guys right here. We're also going to think very carefully about trying to make sure that we are keeping all of our Kruleboyz within 3 inches of terrain, so that if we want to, we're able to throw out we're able to use like a turn 1, what do you call it? Sneak up. I know that you could end your turn within 3, but it is also kind of a good idea to think about like, so like for example, if I leave my Pokrot or my Swamp Collar Shaman right here, then I'm going to be within 3. So if my plan is to leave him still, then I can get sneak up here. But if not, if my plan is to move him forward, then I want to think about where I want him to move, right? So that he can move and be within 3 inches of something here. These Gut Rippers are going to have a really easy time being within 3 inches of terrain because we have this nice couple terrain features that are sitting in the middle. And then last but not least, we're just going to throw our kill boss right here in the middle to make sure that he's going to be within range of both of these guys. Another interesting thing about movement and deployment with these little grots that we have accompanying our heroes here is, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but after you move this unit, then you have to set up the pot grot within 1 inch of the Swamp Collar Shaman. So it's almost like it's an irregularly shaped model that you get to have free rotations on. It's sort of how I envision it, right? So you can move them up, and then this guy can just swap sides. So it's like he gets a free rotation because he is considered part of the model. So you can measure ranges from the pot grot. That's how I understand it. But if I'm wrong, let me know, and join the Discord to have a discussion about it. And if you jump on Patreon and sign up, then I will just concede that you're right. It's one of the great many benefits of being a patron. So then we got Gobsprak. So again, you know, the positioning for Gobsprak is going to be really important based on... So if you look here, so the reason that I'm dropping Gobsprak last of all of these single drops. I could, if I wanted to, actually drop him dead last, depending on what my opponent is doing. So from here, I feel like everything that I've dropped here is relatively easy to drop. The Swamp Calla Shamans, I'm going to put them within range of the Gut Rippas, and then when I drop the Bull Boys, I'm going to also want to put the Bull Boys within range as well. I have a feeling that the Bull Boys are just going to sort of follow behind these Gut Rippas in the front line so that we can unleash hell, and Bull Boys don't want to be sitting at 24 inches, they want to be sitting at like 17 inches away from your opponent. That's their threat range, really. It's either 17 because you can move and then shoot, so move 5 and then shoot 12, or 24 inches, but you want their hasty shot. Everyone knows that their hasty shot is better than their aim shot. So, and also giving that unleash hell protection is also pretty cool. So I have a feeling that we're going to want to put our Bull Boys right behind, and then our Swamp Calla Shamans have a choice. You know, if you're not expecting to do any shooting in the first battle round, which you probably will, but then you can give them the poison, or you can also choose to give like Gut Rippas an elixir and give them Mystic Shield and such if you're expecting to have to take something in the front. So for example, I could give like 1 unit of Bull Boys the poison, and I could give 1 unit of Gut Rippas the elixir, and then go from there. Cool. So depending on what my opponent's doing, depending on what they still have left to drop, if they have wizards left to drop, I might consider keeping Gobsprak back and deploying the rest of these guys over here. So I'm just going to use these Hobgrots just to zone out the side. I'm also going to kind of keep them in reserve a little bit. They could either go here if I'm expecting some teleport shenanigans or anything really fast coming around the side, or if I want, I can just put them right up here on the line, and they can act as a like just feet on this objective, so that maybe my whole army can shift towards the right, and these Hobgrots can just be annoying here on the left. But again, it's like, you know, if you're playing Death and they have like for example, Flesh Eater Courts, when they bring things in, they can bring them wholly within 6 inches of a board edge. So the Hobgrots might actually be served best sitting in your back line and just zoning out any potential teleports or any other shenanigans. So, you know, I feel like this setup is pretty good depending on what your opponent's playing. This whole thing can just be shifted back so that it's not, so that you're further back from the line. But in this case, we're just going to say that it's okay and that we're going to move these things all the way to the front. So again, the Hobgrots can be over here on a flank, they can be over here on the line, or they could be zoning out your back line. So I'm just going to stick them right here. Cool. So again, depending on what wizards your opponent still has left to deploy, depending on what kind of positions you see, you can drop Gobsprak in the back. I like to put him relatively closer to the front because, again, it's like 30 inches, right? So it's like, where did my opponent put their wizards? And what sort of space can I zone out? He should really have a 30-inch aura around him. I think this one is, yeah, this is 18. This is for the Black Pit. I don't know why that's the range I have on him here. Cool. So, I mean, he's going to kind of go wherever, maybe in a safe spot, maybe even deployed up on some terrain. I believe this is definitely doable. Okay, so it's going to be up to you. And then, last but not least, we have our Bull Boys. So, we've already discussed where they're going to be dropped. And they're going to move up with the units to provide Unleash Hell range. And then last but not least, so this is something that you should have been considering when you were first initially dropping, is making sure that everything's going to be within range of your Sledgeraker aura. And then as you move up the board, right? Because if your opponent's like, well, you know, I'm going to go first, trick ya, haha, and then I'm going to throw, you know, a unit of pigs and charge you in. It's like, okay, that's fine because, you know, he has a 3-inch reach over. So your opponent might very well get caught, probably not here, but might very well get caught in combat, which is another thing to consider too, right? Like if you're going to have your Sledgeraker at the front, you know, you can position him in such a way that he actually is within reaching distance over the top of the Gut Rippas. He has a couple of good attacks that you can reach 3 over, so this is a pretty good spot here. And then, yeah, I'm just going to make sure, like, we're a little bit over the line here, but that's just because I was moving everything around, but you get the idea. So everything is within 12 of the Sludge Raker. Everything is the Swamp Color Shamans they have some choice about where they're going to put their poisons. The Kill Boss is sitting in between the 2 unit of Gut Rippers. Gobsprak is going to be wherever we think he is going to be positioned best to be the highest nuisance for unbinds, and our Hobgrots are sitting over the side ready to, just die, because that's what they do best. God bless Hobgrots that die. And then, yeah, so, I mean, here we go. I feel like this is a relatively standard deployment for a unit or for a Kruleboyz list. And again, depending on what your opponent's playing, this whole thing can also be shifted backwards. So that it's not, I should have said escape there, so that it's not too, so that it's out of range of whatever it is that your opponent's going for. How many drops are you? How many casts are you? Do you have any teleports? What's the longest threat range you have for charging? What's the longest threat range you have for shooting? And then you should really sit and think and come up with you can even sketch this out on a piece of paper too, but you can just have your whole deployment planned out before you put your first model down on the table. It's a good idea to have a plan, and then depending on what actually happens, you can shift your plan depending on what your opponent's actually doing. But, it's good to have a plan. Cool. Not bad. So, if you're playing, here is a list that I am thinking about taking into a team tournament environment. This is a Grinnin' Blades list, and it's a 2-drop list. Over here on one side, we have 1 drop, and then over here on the other side, we have 2 drop. It plays 2 Kill Bows, 3x6, 3x6 Bolt Boys, 3 Swamp Collar Shamans, and 3 units of Hobgrots. It's all shooting. It's just a shooting heavy list, and it's a 2-drop. And we play super sneaky, and we generally go second, but the super sneaky target's almost always going to be Gobsprak, to throw Gobsprak into a position where he can unbind. So because these are 2-drops, we're always going to deploy this one on the right hand first. The reason is because, well, it has to be 2 heroes, and I don't want to deploy this package first. I don't want to deploy this package first. This is going to be the bulk of where our damage is going, and it's going to be giving a lot of information to our opponent. So if we have to deploy 2 heroes, we're going to do Gobsprak and a Swamp Collar Shaman, and then we have to do at least 1 unit, so that's going to be the Hobgrots, and then we have room for an artillery because this one is full. We have 5 and an artillery and 3 heroes, so this is a full battle regiment, and then this one is just like bits and pieces of 1 or whatever. So in this list, I'm pretty much always going to move Gobsprak, pretty much always, but another option is I can move a Kill Bow, and as a third option, I can use a unit of Hobgrots. So I'm going to be super sneaking one of these 3 units. And so putting them on the table is actually a way to give your opponent some false information, right? So like, for example, I could take Gobsprak, and I've done this before, and I've stuck him over on the side and deployed him first and his accompanying little group. So I'll be like, okay, like whatever, like here's a Swamp Collar Shaman. I'm going to take this unit of Hobgrots, and I'm going to stick them right over here on the line. And then I'm going to take this Kill Bow, and I'm going to stick them, whatever it is, like right here, kind of beside. Maybe I'll back up Gobsprak just a little bit. And so what this will do is it gives your opponent some false information. It's like, well, here's Gobsprak. And, you should check out my etiquette video, too. I'm going to make that probably right after I finish this one. But I'll tell my opponent that I have Super Sneaky at the start of the game. I'll tell them what it is, because I feel like it's a gotcha mechanic, right? So I'll explain what it is, and then I'll put these things down on the table. But even if you tell your opponent what it is that you're about to do, sometimes they act on the information that they have available to them. So if I stick Gobsprak over here, and then my opponent's measuring 30 inches, and they're like, okay, so, like Gobsprak is within unbind range of everything over here, so they place their wizards over here, and then later I just super sneaky Gobsprak and stick them over here. And then I'm like, cool, like that means you get to go first, and Gobsprak is within unbind range of all of your wizards. So, sorry about that, right? Or it could be the Kill Bow. They can put something big and meaty over here, like a Gargant, and then I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm just going to stick the Kill Bow right here for my super sneaky move, and let you go first. And just sort of put that pressure on you right away. So that's my thinking, my logic anyway. Let me know what you think. So then here's the second drop, and so this is going to be a pretty basic setup. We're going to take our unit of Hobgrots. We're going to stick them on the front. We're going to assume that our opponent can't really get to us turn 1. And then we're going to take our units of Kruleboyz and we're just going to stick them. We're going to think about where we're going to be moving them for our super sneaky. But we're just going to essentially go like 1, 2, and then we're going to measure out our range. And 3. Right, something roughly like this. You could also back these guys up, move him over. When you're deploying too, if you're dropping everything at once, like it's okay if you take some time, right? Like you can move things around. If they're all coming down at the same time, I don't see any reason why you can't like put things down and move things. You know, if it's from a previous deployment, then obviously you can't because those things are set in stone. But you know, here we go. Because these little Hogwarts can be lined up in a straight line if they have 0 space in between them. So obviously they have space here, but you kind of understand what it is that I'm doing. And then we're just gonna set up our Kruleboyz and everything else behind here. And then this Swamp Kala Shaman was set up before, but I kind of knew what I was going to be doing, right? So he was set up here, so he's within range of this unit of Kruleboyz. And then we have 2 Swamp Kala Shamans and a Kruleboyz left. So we're going to set up, we're going to put 1 in this list, right? We're just giving the poisons to the Kruleboyz every turn because we're just, this is a shooting list. So everything here is just going to be shoot, 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 shoot. So that's kind of the idea. And then we're going to let our opponent go first. We're going to say you go first. Again, we're making sure that we're out of range of whatever it is that they're going to do to us on turn 1, right? Make sure they can't charge us, make sure they can't shoot us, make sure they, you know, they're not going to be casting spells or whatever, make sure that, and then we're going to super sneaky Gobsark over here to deny their magical dominance. I guess over here, these Hogwarts could have actually gone in a straight line, and with a Kruleboyz sitting right behind them. And here we go, like we're ready to go, you know? The Kruleboyz aren't very important to have within the Sledgeaker Beast range because, you know, if they're hitting a juicy target, then having that +1 on a 6 for their 1 attack just doesn't really matter, right? Like, it just doesn't really matter. There's a 1 in 6 chance that we do roll the 6. It doesn't really matter. The only thing that I do think for Kruleboyz that is important is I do like them to be within range of a Swamp Kala Shaman so that you can give them the poison if you want to. If your opponent leaves some like, you know, if they're going to set up something juicy within Kruleboyz range on turn 1 and you're not really thinking that you're going to be using the other Kruleboyz to shoot on turn 1, you know, it's okay to changing the math from a 1 in 6 chance of Venom Encrusted Weapons proccing on a Kruleboyz to a 1 in 3 chance of Venom Encrusted Weapons proccing on a Kruleboyz, especially if it's against a target that you actually want to put a lot of damage into and kill, like Gargants, for example. Like, it's okay to put poisons on your Kruleboyz to help get that damage off, because it's a lot. So I wouldn't do it like twice, right? But I would definitely do it once. So there you go. There's kind of how I think a standard Kruleboyz list, both a 1 or like a 2 drop, like a low drop and a high drop, are going to deploy. And then from here, you're like, yeah, you go first, move into my shoot range. Good luck, have fun. But I think that the general principles for deployment are the same. If you've checked out the Kruleboyz and the Ironjaws and the Big Wah video, you know, it's fundamentally the same. It's like, what can my opponent do to me on turn 1? And then do I get to choose to go first or not? And how is everything going to be positioned? Do I want magical dominance, right? Maybe your Swamp Kala Shamans need to be a little bit further back, depending on the deployment zone, right? Because in this one, we are 18 inches apart, but in the maps where it's split, where your territory is a quarter, you're 22 inches apart. So you can sort of, yeah, think about your first battle tactic, maybe your first 2 battle tactics, and go from there. So this list, this Big Yellers list, and this is a Big Yellers list, right? So our range is actually quite considerable with our shooting. This Big Yellers list, I think, is really good in a team format, but I would think that Grid and Blades list that I deployed first is probably a better list overall, just to take to a tournament. So good luck, have fun. Thanks to all the patrons for all your support. I'm gonna do it with or without your support, but hey, it's nice to feel appreciated. Like, subscribe, Wah.